There's a scene, one of my favorite scenes, and Big Frank and the Norwegian were introducing the Vincetti brothers, each with a chapter there. The Norwegian's chapter, I think, is chapter number 21. One of the really great scenes is when the Norwegian meets Richard Kuklinski, a real life killer called the Iceman. And if you can look at Richard Kuklinski, but what you can see in there, and something I do really well, is the Norwegian by that time in the late 70s or the early 70s, whenever it's set, is a legend himself. But he's still insecure because he spends the whole conversation trying to dick wave subtly at Kuklinski. So you have these two serial
trying to follow his superiority, isn't he?
Right. And then when you go to the Norwegian is set a decade later. One of the interesting things that I found and I enjoyed was I'd already introduced Bit von Rheingold in a book called Bit of Golem, where it's sort of my Citizen Kane version of Bit von Rheingold. He's already a billionaire
after he's dead, or
well, he supposedly dies in the book. And one of the things that happens sometimes when I'm writing is I make mistakes. But what I do is I don't like to erase the mistake. I didn't want to go back. For example, I had Bit die and I forgot about it. But Bit von Rheingold in a Norwegian in the Family, did he really die? Because the narrator in the Bit of Golem is not Manny Cole. Manny Cole is a notorious liar. And if you read 64, you know that Manny Cole was hired to write the book by the illegitimate daughter of the woman who marries Paulie Maravelli and is killed by Big Frank.
There is something a bit off about Manny Cole, isn't there? Like all the time through the Vincetti brothers, I'm like, this is basically Dan, but something is off. It's really. But to get back to it's funny that you say, Dan, that most of the people in Norwegian in the Family and Vincetti brothers, or at least Norwegian in the Family, they all are sure of who they are. They know who they are. Because to me, it seems that Bit von Rheingold is the only character who kind of isn't really struggling with who they are, at least on some level. Especially when you look at someone like the gangsters who are, they are clearly under siege. They clearly have a bit of an identity crisis about the mob and or whatever, and so there's a sense of insecurity in that way. Although someone like the Norwegian may be someone with hang-ups, but you're right, he's less willing to project them, or he hides them.
I mean, maybe it's. I mean, the work is done. Your opinion about it is as valid as mine. I'm the author, but that doesn't mean that I can write a scene with this in mind. Maybe I have a political opinion to express. Maybe I want to detail a character. But as long as it's within the realm of possibility. I mean, if I write a poem about a French poodle that lived next door and you think it's about Hitler's invasion of Poland, something's wrong. But if I tell you, for example, Jessica, my wife, when she read A Norwegian Family, it took about 3 months to read it all. And I remember at the end, she was crying. I want to ask you about the end too. But Big Frank, she thinks, is the main character. He has the development arc. We see Big Frank go from, he's a killer, he's a mobster. But remember, there's a few scenes where there's a boy called Ass Rape Delicious.
Delicious Boy.
Yeah. So, and he feels for this kid who he met in Stir when he spent 90 days in a for some minor crime, got bailed out. And he feels for other people. There's a couple of guys that Paulie just wantonly kills, and Big Frank is sort of shocked at it. But in the end, Big Frank is smarter than Paulie. He plays upon, there's only one person in the world Paulie trusts, and it's Big Frank. And Big Frank is the guy who ends up killing him. And annihilating his life. He kills his wife, he kills his lover, he kills Paulie's son.
We kind of can almost see that we that's revealed in Vincetti Brothers, isn't that? So we kind of already know at the beginning.
Well, the Vincetti Brothers is undercut because the Vincetti Brothers says Paulie was just shot at something called the Diamond Brothers Gentlemen's Club. He's a victim of a hit. We later find out the mechanics behind it. We find out, for example, that Big Frank is supposed to take out the Norwegian when Paulie captures the Norwegian, and then Big Frank is supposed to have him killed, and Big Frank takes them, and he kills the other guys and says, "Now you work for me, Norwegian." And and he knows that the Norwegian, with the Norwegian has this, you know, Sir Lancelot thing about him. He thinks he's doing good, and so now Big Frank knows that he's owed. And at the end, when he drives away, you know, he says, "You're going to do something for me," and he hands him the gun. The Norwegian could turn around and kill Big Frank, but Big Frank knows the psychology, and he knows that guy now knows that if he did that, his persona is destroyed. His life is a lie, and he knows
his code of ethics. Like, he is like at certain points, I think he describes himself as a samurai or something.
Yeah, something like he's got this knight complex. He thinks of himself, and you know, it goes back to the cliche that the best villains think that they're heroes. The Norwegian is that. Big Frank probably isn't. Big Frank is, in a sense, a more complex character. But
it always did seem to me like, because like it's like the character like that. I thought that was or it could very well be a theme in the book. This kind of difference between, and this has popped up in other works of yours. This difference between like ego and kind of false confidence and kind of and I especially like this idea of macho ego and macho confidence, and like how in a way already, like in so much media, like gangsters have been the stereotype of that in you know, like from whatever to Mario Puzo and The Godfather to Scorsese and all the horrible knockoffs of those films. And so I feel like what was good about kind of that and like all these ideas, these Dan Schneider ideas about greatness and ego and history, I suppose, gets critiqued in the realm of these gangsters, where they are trying to like create a legacy and they're trying to have an empire, and they, you know, they're all like macho men and they're confident in themselves, but their world is crumbling, and the mob boss himself is falling apart. He's in a bloody Wilhelm Reich orgone machine, like that. So there's like a pathetic element to it as well.